All right. Good morning and good afternoon, people on East Coast, West Coast, and all over the world. So this webinar is hosted by Sunhub in partnership with GoodWe. So our two organizations are deeply aligned in advancing solar adoption for smarter energy storage and practical innovation across the residential and commercial and utilities solar markets. So let's take a dive into this for a second. So your hosts, myself and Jen. I'm from marketing and Jen is the director of sales. So today, the topic that we're going to cover is essentially Q3, Q4 market signals, pricing corridors, supply chain, shutdown and impact, pipeline risk mapping, policy and partner insights. So there's going to be a few takes where some part of the market is something that, just with the current government shutdown, it becomes a bit unpredictable, but there are some forecasted and credible sources that have given us insight in terms of how the market is moving forward and what the forecast looks like for the end of 2025 and what the supply chain and how the supply chain will be affected moving forward for 2026. So let's get down to it. Okay. I'm going to start with a quick snapshot of Q2, and especially with the installation numbers amongst the markets, with the utility scale, commercial, residential, and especially community solar. This is something that probably saw the biggest decline since 2021, especially on the residential side being hit the hardest. And that's something that these numbers are just probably the starting point for this, I'd like to say this session, this next couple of 4 years that we have, especially on the residential side and with its tax incentives taking the biggest hit. That's kind of where we saw a big change in demand and supply, but as well as like new markets emerging with the commercial side, which saw its highest installation year over year with a significant 0.5 gigawatt of increase in solar installation that did occur. Utility scale, that was one part of it that did take the biggest hit, especially with especially with community solar being tied to it closely. It took one of the largest hits of a significant 52% in decline with solar installed. And that number is something that is quite concerning, especially moving forward. And I think that's something that with the current government shutdown, it brings a pivotal question to the job market. And that's something that the job market reports are soon to be announced. And that could change the game for solar industry, let alone every other market in the industry. But there's a few takes when it comes to this. So I just wanted to give that recap real quick, just to give you guys some pre-historical data and just for this year, and then how Q3 has been moving forward, and then what Q4 has for us. So for 2025, especially the first half of 2025, market and the installation market with solar and energy, it has been great, especially with the storage part of it. The energy storage. The demand increase and storage installation increased by 18 gigawatts just in the first half of 2025. And the market dominance increased by 82% as a whole. That is a big a big increase, especially coming from 2021 all the way to now when the tax credit was renewed to 30%. Now that is a big game changer for the storage energy market. Um, for the solar aspect of it, that's something that did take a bit of hit, but it opened up a new strategy toward. Yeah. So the total installed by the mid of 2025 was 248 gigawatts, with solar jobs and the job market report that was released for Q2 being at 279K. For the Q3 job market report, that's something that has been delayed by, um, well, it should have been released by now, but that's something that when we had initially sent out this webinar, it was something that was not predicted that the government would shut down, but it's something that has been delayed. Well, once those numbers are out, it could pretty much determine the future of Q4 and what is to come for the next few quarters or probably years on just the US market as a whole. Getting down to it, in terms of the new power capacity breakdown that did happen during 2025, the first half of 2025, especially on the solar market, this is where it saw the largest increase on the residential side of it. This was, of course, due to the updated policy that took place starting from Q2. Next, it came towards the battery and storage. This was the next aspect of it because now pivoting over to the Q3 and Q4 incentives and policies that did take into effect, they are only able to be utilized when your solar installation is completed. But with battery installations, those project timelines are way quicker. Hence, the market strategy is pivoting. It's pivoting from the solar more towards the battery and energy aspect of it. But as you can see, wind and gas have still been consistent. There has been no increase on that aspect as of yet, but it's hard to say that it will be consistent. It could always change. This is something that it's soon to find out, but I can dive more onto that aspect a bit later. The current focus for this webinar is just more on the solar and battery aspect. Now, I'm just going to dive a bit into each market segment from utility, commercial, and then community solar, especially with the utility aspect of it. This is where this number of 75% essentially just represents the last 3 quarters for 2025. And that was where it was 28% lower than Q2 of 2024. Now that was a slight decrease on the utility scale side. It was something that it took an impact on just the U.S. solar market in general. On the vice versa, Texas was one of the states that led most of the solar installations, especially with the new solar installation capacity installed in the states. Of course, it had its own various reasons, something that can be an influence, but this is something that was quoted and cited by verified sources, and especially taking SIA being the main source of where we had our insights from on this. Now, pivoting towards the residential solar market, it's something that is probably a concern to a lot of people. I think that's probably our largest market out there. Net metering changes, the higher interest rates, and especially with the financial market of it, it all comes down to essentially the government at this point, where the policies are to be set in place if the Fed rate cuts are to take place or not. It's all of a question right now, and it does affect a lot of it. Besides the federal cuts, I think the main thing that we do know is that each state is is starting to introduce their state-specific incentives, as well as like net metering changes that are taking place. But one thing that we do know is that the 30% tax credit is taking the biggest hit, and it has caused the largest change in demand for the residential market. Of course, moving forward, 2026, that policy no longer applies, so it would cause a change in the supply chain as well. More so pivoting to the commercial side of it, taking more of the demand and more of the supply chain. Now, when we come down to the commercial aspect of it, this is something that some people are already calling it the AI bubble. I know most of us over here are familiar with that term. That's where the commercial side of it is kind of taking that demand, because the demand for energy has increased. And if not, 2025 has been one of those years where the demand is constantly, and if not stagnantly, just increasing over time. So the demand for energy is there. And what it is, it's for data centers at the end of the day. This is something that all from I guess from a smaller scale to all the way to a high scale corporate entity, everyone is trying to hop onto the AI game. And it requires energy, it requires data centers, and most of them are your top top corporate solar users, being Meta, Amazon, Google, and Apple. OpenAI is one of them, as well as NVIDIA. But of course, these things are something that are growing, and most of their data centers are situated in Texas. Now, that's something that will also follow towards Virginia. And then I think it's also Washington in one of those states. But those are probably the largest projected solar sites with the largest land mass available, where these corporate entities are already taking place in their installation for these data centers. Now, coming down to community solar, this did take the biggest hit when it came down to the new policies that went in place in 2025. There was a significant downturn by 174 megawatts installed in just Q2. That was a 52% drop from the same quarter a year prior, making one of the lowest quarterly additions in recent years. So the pipeline depletion was at a decrease in 85%. And just think of it like a butterfly effect, that because the pipeline did decrease, the installations dropped by 56%, which overall caused a 36% decrease in installations in just the first half of 2025. Overall causing a 15% decrease in just new program developments. There should have been one more point on this, but that decrease in community solar overall causes a decrease, or well, I guess an increase in unemployment rate. It does affect the solar job market very directly. And what that number is for as of right now is probably at 10,000, and it could be increasing as time goes on. Now, kind of pivoting over to the energy storage market, I think that's something that will soon be the hot topic starting from 2026. I think this big shift is something that will be new to the market because it's always been about solar. Energy storages have always been like the complementary product to the solar. And of course, it needs to be a complete system to complement the solar that's being installed. But it's pivoting over as like the next thing that people will demand more. And it's hard to say as of right now what the pricing on that would look like by itself. But that is where Sunhub does step in terms of being the mediator when it comes to negotiating prices. But I do know that the energy market is about to take a bit of a shift, especially with the demand and consumption and just kind of reliability on that aspect pivots towards the energy storage market. So some things that I do want to highlight on this is these are the federal policies and policy headlines that were implemented, and these were the rippling effects that did take into place. Some of the things that I will kind of dive into a bit more with Jen over here, and just kind of overseeing like how it has impacted the market, what insights that we can see from this, and then of course like some precautionary steps that we want to take as we move forward. But kind of coming back to the government shutdown, because I think that's probably the hot topic for this week or past couple of days. But this is probably the best way I can kind of represent the butterfly effect that did take place, that because of the government shutdown, it did have a major impact to the solar market in general, renewable market, from furloughed staff to permits being frozen, causing project delays, and then overall remobilization costs. This overall can decrease the projected installation that SIA had posted out. I think by how much, it really depends when the government is back up. And then, of course, when those permits are being under review again, like because of this government shutdown, we did see a loss of up to 10,000, kind of being a job loss of over 10,000. And for that to start up again will take a couple of, I would like to say weeks, but it could be a month or two until we start seeing progress on this, where some projects that were near close or about to be commissioned, they could be straight paused. In this case, I think the safe expectation is probably till the end of the year, of around 3 to 4 months of like what this effect is. And I don't know if there will be updated policies in regards to this, where if incentives were to be received based on expected timelines, would they be accounted when it comes to this? It's something that we do need to just kind of keep an eye on the news and just stay up to date on policies if there is an effect on this. I would like to say that SIA will make a statement on this when the government is back and live, but let me keep moving forward on this part. So on the price increase across segments as a whole, we did see the commercial market take the biggest hit. And this is correlated to the supply chain. The commercial market took a 10% increase, utility scale took a 4%, and then residential 2%. Now, this is directly related to the tariffs that are in place. Of course, it varies from each segment, but we want to keep a 10% baseline tariff that is just across the board, regardless of the market itself. That's a staple 10%. And then, of course, as it goes into each division, it will take its own percentage up. Coming to the new market players, and that being the manufacturing boom. It's something that has been, I think, a nice gateway for the US and the domestic market right now. Just getting all manufacturers, especially GoodWe, with us here today. I think that's one part of it that we'll get to hear more on from a manufacturer's point of view and what they foresee, and of course, what Jen, you foresee. So I think let me scroll down on this one. So the projected impact throughout 2030, the current federal actions could significantly reduce solar deployment by 2030 compared to the pre-policy projections, according to SEIA. Now, the base case scenario is that moving forward by 2030, which is the end of this current uh, office era, where it could be a reduction of 44 gigawatts. But as a worst case scenario, we're probably looking at a 55 gigawatt reduction by 2030. Um, Once again, job the jobs within the solar market are probably the biggest thing that are at risk. And that's something that it can vary. It could be at a minimum of 10,000, quite possibly way over. So now I'm gonna kind of pivot over to you, Jen. I'm gonna have some questions. One second. What's my questions? Well,
No, I appreciate it, Danielle, as well. And I feel like you've shared a lot of very good information. I'm learning also, just seeing through some of the insights from previous quarters into what we're looking at for 2026 and further.
yeah. I think it's something that there's less knowledge on about this, especially with just the renewable market being such a niche segment that it doesn't have much insights when certain policies are into effect as a general policy. But when they are updated and when they are affected by the are affected into the solar market, it comes out a bit vague, where you have to do a bit of guesswork just to understand the policy and see what are the outliers and what could be the main affecting factors.
Yep, there's always a ripple, right? There's a ripple impact on all of these things.
Yeah. So I guess, Jen, if if I pivot over to some of the policies, I think ITC is probably one of them. With headlines on ITC uncertainty, how is that shaping the installers today?
Right. Well, that is the main talk, right? And it's been going on for a while. It certainly created a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of digging that needs to be done now to make sure that you have everything lined up and in a row, and you understand the impacts of everything. With delay in getting true guidance, which we now are starting to see, and we now have. Now, I don't want to be all doom and gloom, and I'm actually really optimistic. And I feel from installer conversations that there still is a lot of optimism in the market. What the impact is today is more so a pivot in how we talk about the benefits and how we talk about and evaluate design. It's some of the choices that we make. There's quite a bit of pressure that now comes into place with distributors, with retailers like Sunhub, with manufacturers, to make sure that we can give the best guidance that we can and prepare installers and partner with our installers, EPCs, finance companies, policymakers, to drive everything forward with or without ITC in some cases. The great news is solar is still growing. Average, I think you showed 28% a year over the last decade. And projects without ITC still exist in certain markets, and they're still moving forward.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like, it did take an uptick, but I think it might have been out of just the scaredness of just getting to see the tax incentive go away. So that it does make sense. Like, like this year, it was kind of predicted that demand would have been increased, and it did. But it's hard to say what we're looking at moving forward. Um, if the ITC timing feels less reliable, um, do you think the projects would complete like cleanly, or what's your take on that?
There are still markets right? That's a great question. And I'll very cautiously say cleanly is how projects will be completed. But it's going to take a lot of planning, right? Planning ahead of time, a lot of being as proactive as possible. There are states and markets that you can focus on where electricity rates are still high. You have California, Hawaii, places like New Jersey, Puerto Rico. Even without incentives, the solar markets, solar still makes sense.
Mhm.
There's still some relief that solar is bringing, and with all of the drop in what we'll call reliability, this uncertainty with ITC, when we're seeing rebates on the federal level kind of drop out and phase out, you're seeing this increase in the demand for control, right? Something that's more predictable, and that's where you're seeing this increase, I feel, in storage attachment rates across all segments, commercial, residential, even on the utility side. And we can't forget that although what we're talking about, the big elephant in the room with the ITC, uh, is a federal incentive, it's a big one. There are still state level incentives, right, that we can look at. You have databases like Desire USA, right? And you can see what are the markets that maybe make sense. What kind of pivots can you make today to keep your business thriving and growing, in spite of what goes on, on the national level.
Right, right. No, I definitely agree with that. So, I think, what would you recommend to the installers in terms of prioritizing or planning out?
The thing that no one wants to hear, it's an imperfect science, but you're forecasting. Right. So forecasting is just critical, and more so now than ever. It's always very important, but more so now than ever. Because if you can forecast your demand, it allows you to secure supply early. Right. Work in partnerships with your distributors. Your distributors know production cycles. We're keeping track of logistics timeframes so that you can have what you need for projects or have what you're planning to need in place and local. And it puts you in a much stronger position to kind of weather any storms or any pivots or changes that might happen, right? You keep your timelines as predictable as possible by communicating these things. What kind of portfolios or projects do you have? Talk to your supplier.
See, so, Jen, I have a question. When you
Yeah.
mention production cycles, do you mind just kind of defining that a bit for the audience? Like,
Yes, absolutely. And
oh no, I was gonna say if there's like certain times within the year, or like when you would know like production cycles from an installer point of view, or if it's something that like not everyone would know like the cycle. So yeah.
yeah, I appreciate you asking for clarification too on that. So, as from the manufacturing perspective, as a manufacturer, we operate globally. And a lot of what goes into this, just to take this like bird's eye, way stepped back view on it, is when we bring a product into reality, right? We bring it into the US. It all starts first with proper planning through supply chain, even back to the raw materials. Everything that we do, especially we're focusing on North America, everything that we do for the UL market is very specific product, very specific raw materials, and very specific planning on what are the quantities, when do they need to ship. That comes from this feedback from our distributors. It
Mhm.
comes from the suppliers, and the suppliers are getting this from the installers and the EPCs that have projects. So this can be as short as possible. It can spread out very lengthy if there's no proper planning in place on what kind of materials need to be secured. When you're looking at production schedules, most of the time you can start to plan out pretty stably on a quarterly basis. What is it that I need, and make pivots and adjustments from there. But the last thing you'll want to do is start from zero or start from scratch. So even a best guess is a great starting point on that, because everybody plays in this together. And so I hope that answered your question.
Yeah,
Um,
That was actually insightful. I didn't know it personally.
Yeah.
Well, um, I guess my next one would be that if you could share some insights on FIAC and I guess a guidance when it comes to the complexity of FIAC and the demand for the inverters and batteries just still being high out there.
Mhm.
What would you say, or kind of guide installers this?
Yeah, thankfully, and that's I think the second elephant in the room, right, with FIAC. It seems we do have some final guidance now that I know from our side, our team is still very carefully reviewing through all of it. I'm starting to see third-party companies come into place. Then, if not in existence yet, you'll start to see more and more of these. I feel that are doing the confirmations. They're verifying compliance on FIAC as an external party, writing certificates. It's really created a lot of complexity. There are a lot of minutia. There are a lot of fine details in whether or not you are FIAC or not FIAC. Adding to that, you have domestic content too, which is that extra 10% if you're producing and manufacturing in the US. I think today the best advice I can give is that you don't want to wait for the guidance to be absolutely perfect. Right? You look and lock in your projects and supply where you can. Your distributors have quite the task at hand to go through the suppliers that they carry and make sure that they're giving good guidance. The third party companies that are doing these like attestations are going to be absolutely pivotal. And we're looking at the amount of grid additions here and the amount of supply that we expect to be available, we're saying there's kind of a mismatch. So we have a very long answer in short to say, don't plan everything around the FIAC guidance today. Prepare for it, but don't plan everything around it entirely. Don't wait for the perfect package to come up. You'll have a mix, and it would be healthy to have a mix of things that comply and be prepared to have some that don't to meet demand and curb against supply shortages, especially coming into the end of this year. I think it's still, I have not seen any final list provided by anyone yet with here are the yeses and here are the nos, but I would expect something to happen soon. There are a lot of groups like SIA, which you've mentioned earlier on in this talk, that I'm sure will give some good guidance as well as more and more are uncovered with the final from the Treasury that has come out. So yes, plan to diversify your portfolio. In conclusion, diversify your portfolio. Be prepared for no ITC projects. Be prepared for some where you can potentially claim the ITC still, um, but ultimately work with your distributor on what your overall demand is going to look like so that you can pivot and adjust. In some cases, you might have an economical product that doesn't qualify for a rebate, or you might have a product that might be higher end or a little bit more costly that does have a rebate or incentive at the end. You need to balance both.
Yeah, yeah. No, I that makes sense. Yeah. I guess kind of just with the FIOC and the ITC and just the government shutdown, would you say like would it cause any programs to pause over time, like the shutdown itself, and including EPA grants? Like, what should installers do on that part? Like, would you say there's a time factor involved in that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you nailed it. There's a time factor. Not to oversimplify, but do treat it like it's a scheduling problem, right? If and when projects open, when the freeze is over, that will trigger a backlog, very likely, right? If we're not continuing business here, don't necessarily fall into a hurry up and wait pattern, right? It's very likely that things will open up again. I'm sure that they will, and if backlogs and bottlenecks happen, this demand spike happens, you're looking at facing delays on the supply side. So you want to prepare and prepare ahead of time for what comes after things resume. Of course, evaluate all of your options. This is a good time to get out and get training and have how your proposals are going to look ready. I know in the poll that we started this webinar with, there were some software questions, right, on what kind of platforms you're using. Now is the time to look at that as well, but don't halt activity while you're waiting for answers or waiting for things to resume, or you're running a high risk of getting into those bottlenecks and getting into those backlogs. So do whatever you can to be proactive and get yourself ahead of that curve.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I do appreciate the audience for filling out the polls. That's something that we'll take to provide you additional feedback from Sunhub as well as GoodWe. But that's one method that us as distributors and manufacturers can contribute to cater, kind of provide and service you individually based on who you are. I guess, Jen, kind of moving on, like away from the government, but more towards the state programs and state incentives. Would you say the CNI incentives deserve attention right now, or what would you say is the priority list?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're seeing individual net metering policies from the utilities. You're seeing individual rebates incentives for residential as well as commercial. So really know your market and don't limit yourself to it, right? Look at what reach you have and get familiar with what's available to you in your region. In the interim, there are also advocacy groups all around the US that are focused within their own markets to drive better incentives, better rebates, better state level support for renewables in many, many major markets as well. So really get involved on the local level with the support resources and advocacy groups that are there and available to you too. Or you can always lean on the distributors and the manufacturers that you're working with, because your business, your success is our success. We're here to support you. So if you're looking for direction, I would say on that more regional level, let us know where you're from. Let us know what you're facing, and then we can help and guide and steer and plug you into more resources too that we know of and make it an extension.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I guess my final question to you, Jen, and then I'll pass it over to you fully, is how do installers set up for success? And any advice or any guidance as a final take, and then I guess
Your network, right? Pick good partners, right? It's your network. Um, Groups of trusted people, right? We're all in this together. It is not the time to lone wolf it out there, right? So do ask the hard questions and do bring up the difficult conversations today, because it makes everyone better. But be prepared to adapt and adjust how you present. It could be your product mix, it could be your pricing strategy, it could be your financing partners, and make sure that you're really taking that step back and looking at, okay, where do I fit? And let me put my time in the place that makes the most sense, right? Where can I deliver value, and how can I deliver value? And so we're all here in it together to ask those questions, right? And shape the future.
yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. But yeah, I'm gonna pass it over to you, Jen.
Thank you. And you'll forgive me if I am able to, I don't know that I can control the screen, but if you don't mind clicking through. And we didn't mention this early on, but if you have questions as we go, there is a comments or there's a chat here. We'd love to see what questions you might have. We'll address them at the end. I know we're coming up on time. I'll give a quick overview of who we are in case you're not familiar with GoodWe. We are one of the leading global manufacturers of inverters and batteries. We're on a global scale, we manufacture for everything from residential to utility scale. We're about 6,000 employees strong with a large R&D team that is doing the development and design of these products. And we own all of our own IPs, right? You're going straight to the source. We partner exclusively with distributors like Sunhub to bring products to the UL market, to North America. But outside of that, we're 11 subsidiaries strong throughout the world, 27 sales and service centers. We've got 5 R&D centers, 4 production facilities. And I like to touch on the production facilities that the product that you're purchasing through partners like Sunhub is coming out of Vietnam. Right. We've been in business for quite some time now. We were founded in 2010. North America, we're established as GoodWe USA. We are a Delaware company. We opened here in 2020. That's the same year that GoodWe became publicly listed on the Shanghai Stock Exchange. So we are a publicly traded company. You can see the financial backing behind us. And then with the direction and dedication to the North American market, specifically the UL products, it was just last year that we did open that first overseas factory in Vietnam dedicated to these lines. But it's one thing for me to say all these things, another for us to show you some third-party accolades that we've received. Like notice from Woods Mackenzie, we're #1 residential hybrid inverter supplier. We are top 5 through Woods Mackenzie as global PV inverter shipments. We have other notables or recognizable names like Bloomberg, which I think is really important. Bloomberg recognizes us as the most financially stable, one of the most financially stable inverter manufacturers. And below we have these global recognitions for quality of product like TUV Rhineland and Red Dot for design. What I don't have noted here is we did make Tier 1 status as well. So we are a Tier 1 provider. Now with that, around the world, we're at about 80 gigawatts globally of accumulative capacity installed of our product. The energy storage inverter, which is that flagship product here in the US, we're at about 6 gigawatts around the world of this installed already. We're not by any means a new product or a new company out there. We're tried, tested, and all of the installers that we work with locally, your feedback directly goes into design and development of the products that are intended for the markets that we serve. So here in the US, specifically in the US and in Canada as well, we have a residential solutions portfolio, right? Not just a single product, but a portfolio. The inverter, that central pivotal piece, it is a single SKU that can be used as a PV-only inverter. When we're talking about what opportunities you have in the market, I saw that many of you joining are in the residential space. You have opportunities like repowering. There are also markets where maybe PV only still makes sense without storage. The same inverter can be used for all of those projects, and it doesn't have a required optimizer. Only RSD, your rapid shutdown, with a transmitter that's already built into the inverter itself. We've also, something that's unique, designed this product to have an integrated EV charger that plugs directly into the inverter. It's an AC charger. It's level 2, 9.6 kilowatts. So it allows you to charge your vehicle by plugging directly into the inverter. You can use a Tesla adapter if you have a Tesla car. It comes with a standard plug. But it's simplified down so you have this plug and play. It makes it easy for you as an installer. It makes it easy for the homeowner, less equipment on their wall. And in the app, the charging is smart technology. You have different profiles you can set. So the behavior of the charging can come from the grid, or it can come from your battery or from your PV. Right? And to bring everything full circle, the battery portion of this kit is a modular stackable design. So you can build it to what you actually need on a case-by-case basis. It does stack like Lego. You don't have to wire from one module to the next. Again, just driving forward in this very simplified installation process as the goal behind all of our design and development. We want to have this comprehensive system where everything kind of plugs in place. This can be wall or ground mounted and built in blocks in battery modules of 3.2 kilowatt hours at a time. You have a small stack is 3 modules. It's 9.6 kilowatt hours up to 19.2 with 6 of these modules in a single stack. The control unit and your floor mount come in a single box. You can parallel under UL certification up to 4 of these complete stacks, and it gets you 76.8 kilowatt hours there on a single inverter. And I'd just like to show some of the components in here, this simplified design. So you do stack with the control unit on the top. You'll need 1 control unit per stack if you go beyond the 6 modules. And if you are using a backup system, if you're using the battery for backup, whether it is just essential loads or if you're doing a whole home backup, the single device that you'd incorporate into your design is this ABD, the automatic backup device. It's an all-in-one unit. It includes a smart meter that is ANSI certified as revenue grade. It comes with 2 CTs already. They're pre-configured. And there are 2 additional CTs loose in the box because this system can be either AC or DC coupled. It has multiple breaker options also. So you'll have a 200 amp on the service side, and you'll have a 63 amp breaker that's included on the inverter side for your 11.4, which is our largest size in the ES-US model, or a 40 amp breaker for anything below. So when you're looking at the installation of this, your 3 pieces, your battery, your backup device, and your inverter, your wall mounting, you're connecting the cables, the PV and battery, and your load. Your battery stacks on the floor or the wall if you want to use the wall mount method, connecting your power cables, communication cables. The backup device also wall mounted. You're connecting your power cables, your communication cables, and your EV charger. You're mounting the inverter near your parking typically anyhow, or you're plugging that EV charger cable into the bottom of the inverter, power cable and your RS485. So once you power on your system, you have one-click setup through an app. All right, looks like we have a question that has come in, and I'm just going to jump to that real quick. All right, we can show, I know on the screen here, Daniel's showing a couple of different very simplified diagrams just to show the DC coupling. We can do PV only, we can do AC coupled. These are things that we can share out to you as well. But I do want to highlight and emphasize that if you're looking for any specific guidance on a project, we do have US-based teams. We have pre-sales technical support that will look at single lines or will look at what you drew on a napkin, if so be it, right? To show you how you can configure or how you can set up these systems too. But on the question side, we'll send this out and we'll also give you a link so you can schedule. But our question is about warranty and service process and how quickly replacements or RMA can happen. So our warranty on the product is a standard 10-year. On the inverter, you're extendable in 5-year increments up to 20 years. The warranty extension can be purchased through your distributor, and you can extend your warranty up until the point the original has expired. So you can reach out to Sunhub for pricing in 5-year increments. What we'll require is a serial number on the inverter to attach the extension to. It's a very, very simple process. You'll get a certificate by email of the extension itself confirming. In regard to RMA or replacements, because we have a local team, this is quite a fast process. You're not waiting for product to come from overseas. We have warehouse locations for RMA stock, which thankfully we don't have a whole lot of them, but we do have warehouses for RMA stock or replacement parts in Houston, Texas. So really central to the US. Right, so jumping into commissioning, right, and to tie into replacements RMAs, the app Solar Go is your installer app. It also is a place where you can go into some basic settings too. This, when you're commissioning, will give you a walkthrough menu, step by step by step. It'll recognize the inverter through Bluetooth. You can connect it to Wi-Fi. The inverters also can connect by LAN or 4G. So you can pull it up here and then just follow the very intuitive user interface on this app. Navigate from menu to menu to set the profiles. And you can go ahead, Daniel, on to the next one. And we have a second app is the SEMS portal for monitoring. All right, and to tie into the warranty and RMA, this has access for you to check, troubleshoot, and even for us to check and troubleshoot the inverters on site remotely. We really encourage you to get the inverters online, get them connected to this portal for that reason. We can pop in and we can see what's going on and we can support you much, much faster. So to give a quick sneak peek into this and to also note these apps are available to everyone. You can have an installer profile. You can also add access and you can set some limitations for the end user so that they can monitor their own site. Here you can see the real-time status of all your plants, and we call your job site plants. You can see real-time status. You can see the alerts if there are any. You can see different dashboards and different target devices in here. You can monitor down to the individual job site or individual plant level. Everything from weather data to real-time operation, energy statistics, flow, and consumption. You can manage from here the location, capacity. You can put in financial data as well. And you can look at the statistics. You or the end user can look at the statistics. Here's some examples. One is a retrofit. We're adding storage into an existing system that has PV only today, but the homeowner may have experienced frequent blackouts and they wanted to add storage. You can do that with the system. You can also monitor in the portal for that application. You can have hybrid, which is new installations, and you can monitor in the portal as well. And on CNI projects, you have the capability to manage your CNI projects in the same platform. And you can see your project site monitoring down to third-party weather stations and data loggers. I do see there is a question here in the chat about how much did the apps cost, and I'm very, very glad that someone had asked that. These are free forever, even for CNI. We do not charge for the monitoring apps or commissioning apps at all. In here, we also, in your SEMS platform, you have alarms monitoring and a message center so you can get notifications if anything is going on. In here, this is where from our side, we can dig a bit even further in depth in here if we need to do the troubleshooting, bringing it straight down to the serial number of the device. Okay. And you can pull reports, historical data on any of your locations if you needed to dig in more deeply onto what is going on in a particular location. And then a final note from my side on this portal app, because I think it is one of the biggest features that we have that give you control, into your job sites and speedy service and turnaround times. So it's also app based. So you can use it on a web browser or you can use it from your phone. So from here, we're happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Yeah, guys, free, like ask any questions in terms of policies or if it's related to GoodWe products. Like this is kind of the Q&A part of it. I know this webinar went a bit over time, but we do appreciate that everyone did stick around till the end on this part. And Jen, thank you for joining as well. But just wait until like some questions come in and then we can answer them.
Great. And thank you as well for having me and for the very insightful metrics and statistics that you provided at first. And to all the attendees, I appreciate your time. We will share out a way to schedule with either Team Sunhub or GoodWe for any one-on-one training resources or materials collateral questions that you might have separately on a project-by-project basis too.
Oh, I think one question came in.
All right. Yes. Does GoodWe offer arc fault detection? That's a good question, and I'll touch a bit on the AFCI. We have AI-driven AFCI. We are a string inverter. I know that there was in the past with design on AFCI, you'd have to watch, right? Make sure that you're not seeing nuisance tripping or nuisance faults. With AI driven, we have gotten that down to such a high degree of accuracy that we've really minimized that. And it gives you a very, very a safe piece of equipment out there that's not giving you these false alarms so much. It really is doing what it's intended to do. Detecting when there is true arc fault.
Well, I think if those are all the questions, I think we can end this webinar. I know we're a bit over time, just a few minutes, but I think it was really well.
Thank you, Daniel. We were close. Yeah, and to second you, thank you everyone for hanging in there with us, and we'll see what 2026 brings. I think there's plenty of reasons to stay optimistic.
Yeah, and so expect an email coming out with a follow-up email after this, probably tomorrow. It'll have Jen's information. It'll have Sunhub's information. So as you're looking to procure, feel free to reach out. It'll have more information in terms of details and specs, and then a recap of the webinar will also be shared with everyone. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Jen. Take care, everyone.